The gunshot that shattered the morning silence of Sweetwater, Texas in the spring of 1877 changed everything for Olivia Fletcher. But she would not discover the full horror until the sun climbed higher, and the riders came thundering back without the wagon, without the supplies, and without her husband of 2 years, James Fletcher. She stood on the porch of their modest ranch house, one hand pressed against her swollen belly, where their child grew beneath her cotton dress, the other shielding her eyes from the brutal sunlight as she watched the dust cloud approach with a dread that turned her bones to ice. The ranch foreman, an older man named Caleb, dismounted before his horse had fully stopped, his weathered face gray with shock and what looked like shame. "Mrs. Fletcher," he began, and she knew from those 2 words alone that her world had just collapsed. "Where's James?" Her voice came out steady despite the earthquake happening inside her chest. "The Garrett gang ambushed us about 15 miles north near the Canyon Pass. They wanted the payroll money your husband was carrying to buy the breeding stock from the Morrison Ranch. James," he fought back. "Mrs. Fletcher, he fought like a wildcat, but there were too many of them. They took him. They took him and the money both, and they said if anyone followed, they'd kill him for certain." Olivia's knees buckled, but she caught herself against the porch rail. The baby kicked inside her as if sensing her distress, and she forced herself to breathe, to think, to not collapse into the terror that threatened to drown her. "Did you send for the sheriff?" "Yes, madam." Caleb rode straight to town, but Sheriff Morrison, he said the Garrett gang operates across 3 territories now, said they hide out in the Badlands where no lawman has jurisdiction, said even if he could get a posse together, tracking them would be near impossible. Caleb twisted his hat in his hands. "I am sorry, Mrs. Fletcher. I am so damn sorry." The other ranch hands stood in a semicircle behind Caleb, all of them looking at the ground, at the sky, anywhere but at her face. She understood what they were not saying. James was as good as dead. The Garrett gang had a reputation that stretched from Texas to the New Mexico territory, and that reputation involved leaving no witnesses and showing no mercy. "Thank you for telling me," she heard herself say, though the words seemed to come from somewhere far away. "Please see to the horses." She went inside before they could see her cry, closing the door and leaning against it as the tears came in great, racking sobs that shook her entire body. James. Her gentle, hard-working James, who had courted her with wildflowers and poetry, who had built this ranch from nothing, who had been so excited about the baby that he had already started building a cradle in the barn. Gone. Taken by men who killed for sport and profit. The rest of that day passed in a blur of neighbors arriving with condolences and covered dishes, of women patting her hand and telling her to have faith, of men speaking in low voices about the impossibility of rescue and the likelihood of widow's weeds. By nightfall, Olivia sat alone in the house that suddenly felt cavernous, one hand on her belly, trying to figure out how she would survive, how she would run a ranch, how she would raise a child without its father. The answer came 3 days later in the form of a stranger on a dusty roan horse. Olivia was hanging laundry when she noticed him riding up the path to the house. He sat tall in the saddle, a lean figure dressed in worn leather and denim, with a wide-brimmed hat pulled low against the sun. She tensed, her hand moving instinctively toward the rifle she had started keeping within reach at all times, but something about the way he rode, unhurried, and with both hands visible, told her he meant no harm. He stopped a respectful distance from the house and dismounted, removing his hat to reveal a face that looked to be in his late 20s, perhaps 30, tanned and angular with eyes the color of summer grass. "Mrs. Fletcher?" "I am she." "My name is Wade Barrett. I heard in town about what happened to your husband. I wanted to offer my services if you have need of a hand. I know you have got men working here, but I heard some of them are talking about moving on, what with the uncertainty and all." Olivia studied him carefully. He had an honest face, but she had learned young that honest faces could hide dishonest hearts. "Why would you want to work for a ranch that might not survive the season?" Wade looked at her directly, and she saw something in his eyes that she could not quite name. Sadness, perhaps? Understanding. Because I know what it is to lose everything, madam. And I know what it means when somebody extends a hand when you need it most. I am a hard worker, good with horses and cattle. I do not drink, I do not gamble, and I will work for fair wages and a place to sleep. That is all I'm asking. There was something in his voice, a quiet sincerity that cut through her suspicion. She needed help. Caleb had already told her that 2 of the younger hands had given notice, unwilling to work for a woman, especially one in her condition. The spring roundup was coming, and there was more work than the remaining men could handle. Can you start tomorrow? I can start today if you need me to. That was how Wade Barrett came to work at the Fletcher Ranch, and how Olivia's life began its slow, unexpected transformation. The first week, Wade kept mostly to himself, working alongside the other hands but sleeping in the small bunkhouse at the edge of the property. He proved to be everything he had claimed, up before dawn to help with the feeding, spending long days mending fences and breaking the new horses that James had purchased before his abduction. Olivia watched him from a distance, still cautious, still waiting for some sign that he was not what he seemed. But Wade remained steady, reliable, and unfailingly respectful. When he spoke to her, which was seldom, he called her Mrs. Fletcher and kept his eyes on his hat brim. When the other hands grumbled about taking orders from a woman, she heard through Caleb that Wade had shut down such talk with a few quiet words about decency and honor. It was the middle of the second week when things shifted. Olivia had been trying to lift a heavy sack of feed in the barn, refusing to ask for help because she needed to prove she could manage on her own. The sack slipped from her grasp and she stumbled backward, would have fallen if Wade had not appeared from nowhere to catch her elbow and steady her. Mrs. Fletcher, please, let me get that. His voice was gentle but firm. I can manage. I know you can, but you do not have to. Not with all of us here. He picked up the sack as if it weighed nothing and carried it to where she had been headed. When he turned back to her, his expression was concerned. You should not be doing heavy lifting in your condition, madam. It is not safe for you or the baby. Olivia felt tears prick her eyes, and she hated herself for the weakness. I cannot afford to be fragile right now. This ranch is all I have, all my child will have. If I show weakness, I will lose everything. Wade was quiet for a moment, then said softly, accepting help is not the same as showing weakness. The strongest people I have ever known were the ones who understood they could not do everything alone. Something in those words broke through the wall she had been building around herself. She sank down onto a hay bale, suddenly exhausted beyond measure. I do not know how to do this. I do not know how to run a ranch and have a baby and survive without him. James was supposed to be here. We had plans. We were going to build something together, raise our children here, grow old watching the sunset from that porch. Her voice cracked. And now he is gone, and I am alone, and I am so afraid. She had not meant to say any of that, certainly not to a man she barely knew. But once the words started, she could not stop them. Wade listened without interrupting, his green eyes full of a compassion that made her chest ache. When she finally fell silent, he crouched down so he was at eye level with her. You are not alone, Mrs. Fletcher. You have got people here who want to help you. Let us carry some of the weight for a while until you are strong enough to pick it back up yourself. Why do you care? The question came out almost as an accusation. You do not know me? You did not know James? Why would you involve yourself in our tragedy? Wade's expression shifted, became distant. 3 years ago, I had a wife, Sarah. We had a little place up in Colorado, nothing fancy, but it was ours. One winter, sickness came through the territory. She caught fever, and it took her in less than a week. I was away on a cattle drive when it happened. By the time I got back, she was already buried. He paused, his jaw working. I know what it is to come home to an empty house. I know what it is to feel like the future you planned just vanished like smoke. And I know that the only thing that saved me was the kindness of strangers who had no reason to help except that they were good people." Olivia's throat tightened. "I am sorry for your loss." "And I am sorry for yours. The difference is your husband might still be out there. There might still be hope." She shook her head. "The sheriff said the Garrett gang never returns their hostages. James is either already dead or he will be soon." "Maybe. But until you know for certain, you owe it to yourself and that baby to keep fighting. Keep this ranch running. Keep your hope alive. And if the worst has happened, then you owe it to his memory to build the life he wanted for you." There was a fierceness in Wade's voice that struck something deep inside her. He was right. She had been so consumed by grief and fear that she had forgotten to be angry, forgotten to fight. James would not have wanted her to give up. He would have wanted her to protect their child, to protect their legacy. She stood up, wiping her eyes. "You are right. Thank you, Mr. Barrett." "Wade, please." "Thank you, Wade." From that day forward, something shifted between them. It was not quite friendship, not yet, but a tentative alliance built on shared grief and mutual respect. Wade began taking on more responsibilities around the ranch, not overstepping, but filling in the gaps that James's absence had left. He consulted Olivia on every decision, making sure she felt in control, but offered suggestions when she seemed uncertain. The other hands noticed the change and seemed to take their cue from Wade's respect. If he treated Mrs. Fletcher as the boss, then so would they. The grumbling stopped. The work continued. As April turned to May and the Texas heat began to build in earnest, Olivia's belly grew rounder and her movements became slower. Wade took to checking on her more frequently, bringing her water when she was working in the garden, insisting she rest in the shade during the hottest part of the day. She protested at first, but gradually came to appreciate his concern. It felt less like being coddled and more like being cared for, and she had not realized how much she missed that simple kindness. One evening in late May, as the sun painted the sky in shades of gold and crimson, Olivia sat on the porch watching Wade work with a young colt in the corral. He had a gift with horses, a patience and gentleness that seemed at odds with his rugged exterior. The colt, skittish and wild just days before, now followed him around like a loyal dog. Wade must have felt her watching because he looked up and waved. Without thinking, she waved back, and a smile crossed his face that transformed it entirely. Her heart did an unexpected flutter, and she pressed a hand to her chest, confused by the sensation. It felt disloyal to James to feel anything warm toward another man when her husband might still be alive somewhere. But as the days passed, she could not help noticing more things about Wade Barrett, the way he hummed softly while he worked, old songs she did not recognize, the careful way he handled everything, from the most delicate task to the heaviest labor, the thoughtfulness in his eyes when he looked at her, as if he truly saw her, not just a pregnant widow to be pitied, but a whole person with thoughts and feelings and dreams. June arrived with a vengeance, bringing temperatures that made the air shimmer and turned the ground hard as iron. Olivia was 7 months along now, moving slowly and tiring easily. The midwife in town had told her everything looked normal, but had cautioned her to take care, to avoid stress and overwork. Easier said than done when running a ranch. One afternoon, when the heat was so oppressive that even the cattle stood motionless in what little shade they could find, Olivia made the mistake of going to check on the chickens without her bonnet. She was halfway back to the house when dizziness overcame her. The world tilted, and she felt herself falling. Strong arms caught her before she hit the ground. Wade lifted her as if she weighed nothing, carrying her swiftly to the house and laying her on the sofa in the parlor. "Caleb, get water and a cool cloth," he barked to someone outside, then turned his attention back to her. "Mrs. Fletcher, can you hear me, Olivia?" It was the first time he had used her given name, and something about it, the intimacy and the concern in his voice, brought her fully back to consciousness. "I am all right, just got dizzy from the heat." "You are not all right. You're white as a sheet, and you nearly collapsed." His hands were gentle as he loosened the collar of her dress slightly, giving her more air. Caleb appeared with the water and cloth, and Wade pressed the cool fabric to her forehead, her cheeks, the back of her neck. You cannot keep pushing yourself like this. The ranch can survive a little neglect. What it cannot survive is you making yourself sick. I was just checking the chicken. Then ask one of us to check the chickens. That is what we are here for. He held the water glass to her lips. Drink, small sips. She obeyed, feeling foolish and vulnerable and strangely cared for all at once. When she had drunk half the glass, she pushed it gently away. I am sorry, I did not mean to cause a fuss. Stop apologizing for needing help. Wade's voice was firm but kind. You are carrying a child in this heat while trying to run a working ranch. You are not superhuman, Olivia. You are allowed to have limits. There it was again, her name in his mouth. And this time she did not have the heat to blame for the warmth that spread through her chest. She looked at him, really looked at him, and saw the genuine worry in his eyes, the care etched into every line of his face. When had this stranger become someone she trusted? When had his presence become something she looked forward to rather than merely tolerated? Thank you, she said softly, for catching me, for caring. Something passed between them in that moment, an understanding that went beyond words. Wade's hand, still holding the cloth, stilled against her cheek. For a heartbeat, maybe two, they simply looked at each other. Then he seemed to remember himself and pulled back, standing abruptly. I will have Caleb bring you some supper. You should rest for the remainder of the day. He left before she could respond, and Olivia lay on the sofa feeling confused and guilty, and something else she did not want to name. She was a married woman, or at least she still thought of herself that way, even though James had been gone for nearly 3 months now. She had no business feeling anything for Wade Barrett beyond gratitude for his help. But her heart, it seemed, had not received that message. The next few weeks were a study in careful distance. Wade still performed his duties with the same dedication, still checked on her welfare, but he maintained a formality that had not been there before. He called her Mrs. Fletcher again, kept his eyes averted, spoke only when necessary. Olivia told herself it was better this way, proper and appropriate, given the circumstances. She told herself that, but she did not believe it. The truth was that she missed the easy companionship that had been developing between them. She missed his small kindnesses, his quiet strength, his steady presence. The ranch felt emptier without their conversations, without his smiles. It was the first week of July when everything changed again. Olivia was in the kitchen preserving vegetables when she heard the sound of riders approaching fast. Her heart jumped into her throat. Fast riders never brought good news. She went to the window and saw Sheriff Morrison dismounting in the yard, his face grim. Wade appeared from the barn, and they spoke briefly before both men turned toward the house. Olivia opened the door before they could knock, her hands trembling. Mrs. Fletcher, the sheriff began, and she knew from his tone that whatever he had to say would shatter what remained of her world. We found your husband. Hope and dread warred in her chest. Is he alive? The sheriff removed his hat, turning it slowly in his hands. No, madam, I'm sorry. Some trappers found his body buried in a shallow grave about 50 miles north of here, near the border. It took us this long to identify him, but it is definitely James. The Garrett gang shot him about a week after they took him, from what we can tell. Probably when they realized he was not going to fetch any ransom. The world went silent. Olivia heard the words but could not quite process them. James was dead. Truly dead. Not missing, not possibly alive somewhere, but dead and buried and gone forever. The fragile hope she had been clinging to, the possibility that somehow he might return, evaporated like morning dew under the brutal sun. I am so very sorry, Sheriff Morrison was saying. We are bringing his body back to Sweetwater for proper burial. Should arrive tomorrow or the day after. If there is anything you need, anything at all, you just let me know. Olivia nodded mechanically, unable to form words. The sheriff said something else, but she did not hear it. The sound of his horse leaving, the creak of Wade's boots on the porch boards, all of it seemed to come from very far away. "Olivia?" Wade's voice cut through the fog. "You should sit down." She let him guide her to a chair, let him press a glass of water into her hands. The tears would not come. She felt numb, hollow, as if her insides had been scooped out and replaced with nothing. "What do I do now?" she whispered. Wade knelt in front of her, his hands gentle on hers. "Now you grieve. You let yourself feel what you need to feel. And then when you are ready, you keep going. For yourself, for your baby, for the life James wanted you to have. I do not know if I can. You can. You are the strongest person I have ever met, Olivia Fletcher. You have been running this ranch and growing a child and holding yourself together with hope alone for 3 months. If you can do that, you can do anything." His faith in her, absolute and unshakable, brought the tears at last. They came in great, gasping sobs that shook her entire body. Wade did not try to quiet her or tell her everything would be fine. He simply stayed there, holding her hands, lending her his strength until she had cried herself empty. The funeral was held 3 days later on a hot July morning that felt cruelly cheerful. It seemed wrong that the sky should be so blue, the birds singing so sweetly when they were putting James in the ground. Half the town turned out. People who had known James, who respected him, who wanted to pay their respects to his young widow. Olivia stood at the graveside in her black dress, feeling the weight of her pregnancy and her grief pressing down on her like physical things. Wade stood slightly behind her and to the left, a steady presence that kept her upright when she wanted to collapse. When the service ended and people began filing past to offer condolences, his hand touched her elbow briefly, a reminder that she was not alone. The weeks that followed were difficult in ways Olivia had not anticipated. The finality of James's death settled over her like a shroud. There would be no miraculous rescue, no joyful reunion. He was gone, and she had to find a way to move forward without him. Wade remained a constant during that time, taking over more of the ranch management so she could rest and prepare for the baby's arrival. He never overstepped, always consulting her on decisions, but his competence and dedication meant she did not have to carry the full burden alone. The other hands looked to him for direction now, and he led them with a quiet authority that reminded her painfully of James. But Wade was not James. He was himself, unique and complicated and increasingly important to her in ways that made her feel both guilty and grateful. She found herself watching for him in the mornings, listening for his voice among the others, feeling lighter when he was near. It was wrong, she told herself. She was 8 months pregnant with another man's child, still in mourning. She had no business developing feelings for anyone. Yet the feelings persisted, growing stronger with each passing day. It was mid-August when labor began. Olivia woke in the pre-dawn darkness to cramping pains that quickly intensified. She managed to get herself to the door and call for help, and within minutes the house was full of activity. Caleb rode for the midwife, while Wade helped Olivia back to her bed, his face pale with concern. "How bad is the pain?" he asked, helping her settle against the pillows. "Bad enough." She gripped his hand as another contraction rolled through her. "I am scared, Wade." "I know, but you are going to be fine. You and the baby both. Mrs. Henderson has delivered half the children in this county. You are in good hands." The midwife arrived as the sun was rising, a capable woman in her 50s who took one look at Olivia and started issuing orders. Wade was shooed from the room along with all the other men left to pace the porch and wait. The labor lasted 14 hours, long and difficult, but ultimately successful. When the baby's cries finally filled the air, Wade felt his knees go weak with relief. Mrs. Henderson appeared on the porch some time later, wiping her hands on her apron and smiling. "You have got a healthy baby boy, Mr. Barrett. Mother and child are both doing well, though Mrs. Fletcher is exhausted, as you would expect. Wade did not correct her assumption that he was the father. Can I see them? Give us a few minutes to get cleaned up, then yes. When he finally entered the bedroom, the sight that greeted him stole his breath. Olivia lay propped against the pillows, her hair damp with sweat, her face drawn with exhaustion, holding a tiny bundle wrapped in soft blankets. She looked up when he entered, and the smile that crossed her face was radiant despite her tiredness. "Come meet him," she said softly. Wade approached slowly, reverently, and looked down at the tiny red face peeking from the blankets. The baby had a shock of dark hair and a button nose, and as Wade watched, his little mouth opened in a yawn that revealed toothless gums. "He is perfect," Wade breathed. "His name is Thomas James Fletcher, after my father and his." Olivia looked at the baby with such love that Wade felt his heart constrict. James should be here. He should be holding his son. "I know, I am so sorry, Olivia." She reached out and took Wade's hand, squeezing it gently. "But I'm grateful you are here. You have been such a help, such a friend. I do not know how I would have managed without you." Friend. The word should have felt right, but instead it cut like a knife, because Wade had realized somewhere in the long months since he had first ridden up to the Fletcher ranch that his feelings for Olivia had moved far beyond friendship. He cared for her deeply, admired her strength and resilience, found himself thinking about her at odd moments throughout the day. And now looking at her with her child, James's child, he felt the full impossibility of his situation. She was a widow, still in mourning. She had just given birth to another man's baby. Even if she felt anything for him beyond gratitude, which he doubted, it would be wildly inappropriate for him to say anything. She needed time to grieve, to heal, to adjust to motherhood. His feelings were his burden to bear, not hers. "I am glad I could help," he said quietly. "You should rest now. Mrs. Henderson said you need to build your strength back up." He left before the longing in his chest could translate to his face, before he could say or do something foolish that would ruin everything. The next few weeks were an adjustment for everyone. Thomas was a good baby, relatively calm and quick to settle, but he still needed constant attention. Olivia threw herself into motherhood with the same determination she had shown in running the ranch, learning to nurse and change and soothe with a fierce protectiveness that Wade found both admirable and heartbreaking. He kept his distance as much as the ranch would allow, focusing on the work and trying not to think about the woman in the house or the child who would grow up without a father. But distance was difficult in close quarters and impossible when Olivia needed help. It was late September when she asked him to join her on the porch after supper. Thomas was asleep in his cradle just inside the doorway, and the evening air was finally beginning to cool after the brutal summer heat. Olivia settled into the rocking chair that James had made for her, and Wade took a seat on the porch steps, maintaining a respectful distance. "The ranch is doing well," Olivia said after a moment. "Better than I expected, honestly. The cattle are healthy. We have had good grass this year, and the new horses you trained are selling well. I have been going over the books, and if next year is half as good as this one, we will be more than solvent. We will actually be prosperous. That is good news." "It is. Largely because of you." She looked at him directly. "You saved this ranch, Wade. You saved me. I want you to know that I know that." Wade shifted uncomfortably. "I just did what anyone would do." "No, you did not. Most men would have seen a pregnant widow and moved on, not wanting the complication or the responsibility. You stayed. You worked harder than anyone I have ever met. You turned things around when I was too grief-stricken to see straight." She paused, choosing her words carefully. "I have been thinking about the future, about what is best for Thomas, for the ranch, for me, and I have made a decision." Wade's heart began to pound. "What decision?" "I want to offer you a partnership, 20% of the ranch. in exchange for continued management and your expertise. You have earned it 10 times over, and it would give you a stake in the success of this place, a reason to stay if you want to. It was a generous offer, more than generous, but the words, "if you want to," echoed in his mind. Did he want to stay? Yes, more than he could say. Did he want to spend years watching Olivia from a distance, knowing he could never have more than her friendship and professional respect? That was a harder question. "That is very kind of you," he said slowly, "but you do not have to do that. I have been paid fairly for my work." This is not about obligation. It is about recognizing your contribution and securing the future of the ranch. I need someone I can trust, Wade. Someone who will help me build something lasting for Thomas to inherit. I cannot think of anyone I would rather have as a partner than you. Partner. The word resonated through him, carrying layers of meaning she probably did not intend. He looked at her, silhouetted against the light from inside the house, and felt the full weight of his feelings pressing against his ribs. "I need to tell you something," he said before he could stop himself, "and I want you to know that I do not expect anything in response. I am telling you because I cannot keep carrying it alone, and because I think you deserve the truth." Olivia went very still. "What truth?" Wade took a deep breath, knowing this might ruin everything, but unable to hold back any longer. "I have feelings for you, Olivia. Deep feelings. It started slowly, just respect and friendship, but somewhere along the way it became more. I know the timing is terrible. I know you are still grieving James, and you have a baby to care for, and the last thing you need is me complicating your life. But if I'm going to be your partner, if I'm going to stay here long term, you need to know where I stand. You need to know that every time I look at you, I see not just an employer or a friend, but a woman I admire and care for and could easily love if you gave me half a chance." The silence that followed felt eternal. Olivia stared at him, her expression unreadable in the gathering darkness. Wade prepared himself for rejection, for awkwardness, for the end of everything they had built together. Then she said very softly, "I thought I was the only one who felt it." Wade's heart stopped. "What?" "I have been feeling guilty for weeks, maybe months now. Feeling things I should not feel, not so soon after James's death. But I cannot seem to help it." She stood and moved to the porch rail, looking out at the darkening land. "You are not James. You will never be James. And I do not want you to be. But you are good and kind and patient. And you have been there for me when no one else was. You stepped in when Thomas needed a man around, when I needed help. And you did it without asking for anything in return. How could I not develop feelings for someone like that?" Wade stood slowly, hardly daring to breathe. "Are you saying what I think you are saying?" "I am saying that I care for you too, Wade Barrett. More than I should, probably. More than is sensible given how little time has passed since I buried my husband." She turned to face him, and even in the dim light he could see the tears on her cheeks. "But I also know that life is short and uncertain, and that James would not want me to spend the rest of my life alone and miserable out of some misguided sense of loyalty to his memory. He loved me. He would want me to be happy." Wade closed the distance between them slowly, giving her every opportunity to change her mind or pull away. When he stood before her, close enough to touch but not quite touching, he said, "I would never try to replace him. I would never ask you to forget him or pretend he did not matter. I know. That is part of why I trust you." She reached up and touched his face, her fingers gentle against his cheek. "I am not ready for anything dramatic, not yet, but I would like to see where this could go if you are willing to be patient with me. I would wait forever if you asked me to." The kiss that followed was soft and tentative, a promise more than a passion. Wade cupped her face in his hands, tasting the salt of her tears, feeling the trembling of her lips against his. It was not the kiss of wild romance or desperate need. It was the kiss of two wounded people finding comfort and hope in each other. And it was perfect. When they finally pulled apart, Olivia was smiling through her tears. Stay for supper tomorrow, not as an employee or a partner, but as a friend. As someone I am courting, I suppose, though that sounds strange to say out loud. I will stay for every supper you will have me at. Good, because Thomas needs to get used to having you around. He is going to need a good man in his life as he grows up. The implication of those words, the future they suggested, made Wade's throat tight with emotion. I would be honored to be that man, if you will let me. That night marked the beginning of a new chapter for both of them. They took things slowly, mindful of propriety and Olivia's need to grieve properly. Wade continued to work the ranch and sleep in the bunkhouse, but he joined Olivia and Thomas for meals, helped with the baby when his other duties allowed, and spent his evenings on the porch talking with Olivia about everything and nothing. The other ranch hands noticed the change, but if they had opinions about it, they kept them to themselves. Caleb, the old foreman, pulled Wade aside one day in October and said simply, "That woman has been through hell and back. If you hurt her, there would not be enough of Texas for you to hide in. But if you are good to her, if you help her build the life she deserves, then you have my blessing and my respect." "I intend to be very good to her," Wade promised. As autumn gave way to winter, their relationship deepened. Olivia found herself laughing again, something she had not done since before James's abduction. Wade brought joy back into her life, not by trying to replace what she had lost, but by offering something new and precious. She loved his quiet humor, his strength tempered with gentleness, the way he looked at Thomas as if the boy were his own. Thomas, for his part, seemed to thrive with Wade's attention. At 3 months old, he began smiling at faces, and his biggest smiles were always for Wade. The first time Olivia saw her son reach his little hands toward Wade, gurgling happily, she felt something shift in her heart. This was right. This was what family was supposed to feel like. December brought cool weather and the approach of the holidays. Olivia decorated the house with pine boughs and candles, determined to make Thomas's first Christmas special even though he was too young to remember it. Wade helped her string popcorn for the small tree they had cut from the property, and they worked side by side in comfortable silence, occasionally brushing hands or exchanging smiles. On Christmas Eve, after Thomas had been put to bed, Wade presented Olivia with a small wrapped package. She opened it to find a delicate silver locket on a fine chain. Inside were 2 spaces for photographs or locks of hair. "For James and Thomas," Wade explained quietly, "so you can keep them both close to your heart always." The thoughtfulness of it brought tears to her eyes. "It is perfect. Thank you. I wanted you to know that I understand James will always be part of your life, part of who you are. I am not threatened by that. His memory made you the woman you are, and that woman is someone I am falling in love with." Olivia set the locket down carefully and took both of Wade's hands in hers. "I am falling in love with you too. I fought it at first, felt guilty about it, but I do not anymore. You have given me so much, Wade, hope and help and companionship. You have made me believe in the future again." Their kiss was deeper this time, more certain. When they pulled apart, Olivia rested her forehead against his. "I am ready for more, if you are. I am ready to think about a real future together." "What does that mean?" "It means I would like you to move into the house, into the spare room for now to be proper, but not as an employee, as family, as someone who belongs here." She paused, gathering her courage. "And it means that when a suitable amount of time has passed, when I am no longer in mourning, I would like to discuss the possibility of marriage, if that is something you would want." Wade pulled back to look at her, his green eyes searching her face. "You mean that? You would marry me?" "I would. Not to replace James, but to build something new with you. To give Thomas a father who would love him and raise him well. To give myself a partner in every sense of the word." She smiled. "I love you, Wade Barrett. It took me a while to admit it, but it is true. I love you, and I want to spend my life with you." I love you too, more than I can say." He kissed her again, then pulled her into an embrace that felt like coming home. "I will move into the house. I will wait as long as you need before we marry, and I will spend every day of the rest of my life making sure you never regret taking a chance on a drifter who showed up on your doorstep. You were never just a drifter. You were an answer to a prayer I did not know I was praying." Wade moved into the house the next day, taking the small bedroom at the end of the hall. It was proper and respectable, but it also signaled to the world that he was part of the Fletcher household now, not just an employee. The hands adjusted to the new arrangement with minimal fuss, and the people of Sweetwater, when they heard, seemed to approve. Olivia had suffered enough, they said. She deserved happiness, and Wade Barrett seemed like a good man. The winter passed in a blur of daily routines and small intimacies. Wade learned the rhythms of life with a baby, the midnight feedings and diaper changes, the endless laundry and the moments of pure wonder when Thomas discovered his toes or laughed for the first time. He found himself marveling at the trust Olivia placed in him, allowing him to care for her son, to be present for all the small milestones of early childhood. Thomas took his first steps in March, toddling across the kitchen floor into Wade's waiting arms. The look of pride and love on Wade's face made Olivia's heart swell. He had become a father in every way that mattered, even if biology said otherwise. As spring arrived and the land burst into bloom, Olivia made a decision. She had been in mourning for a year, a respectable period by anyone's standards. James would always hold a place in her heart, but her future lay with Wade. It was time to make that future official. One evening in April, exactly a year after James's death, she found Wade in the barn tending to a mare about to foal. He looked up when she entered, smiling that warm smile that never failed to make her pulse quicken. "The mare is close. Should be tonight or early tomorrow." "I will stay up with you." She settled onto a hay bale nearby. "I actually wanted to talk to you about something." Wade's expression grew serious. "Is everything all right?" "Everything is perfect. That is what I wanted to talk about." She took a deep breath. "I think it is time, Wade. Time for us to get married, to make this official. I have done my mourning. I have paid my respects to James's memory. Now I want to start my life with you, properly and completely." Wade set down the brush he had been using and came to kneel in front of her. "Are you certain? I do not want you to feel rushed. I am certain. I love you. I want to be your wife. And I want Thomas to grow up knowing you as his father, not his stepfather, not some distant figure, but his real father in every way that matters. He will always know about James. We will make sure of that. I know. But you are the one who will teach him to ride and rope, to be a good man, to treat people with kindness and respect. You are the one who will be there for all the important moments. You are his father, Wade, and I want that to be official." Wade's eyes were bright with unshed tears. "Then yes. Yes, I will marry you, Olivia Fletcher. I will be honored and grateful every day of my life." They were married on a beautiful May morning with Thomas toddling between them in the small church in Sweetwater. It was a simple ceremony, attended by friends and neighbors, nothing like the grand affair Olivia's first wedding had been, but it felt more real somehow, more grounded in genuine love and mutual respect. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife and Wade kissed her, Olivia felt something click into place, as if the scattered pieces of her life had finally found their proper arrangement. This was her family now, Wade, Thomas, and the future they would build together. The years that followed were full of the ordinary miracles of daily life. The ranch prospered under their joint management, growing from a modest operation to one of the most successful in the region. Wade proved to be not just a skilled rancher, but a savvy businessman, and together he and Olivia built something that would support generations to come. Thomas grew into a bright, energetic boy who adored his father and showed early signs of having Wade's gift with horses. When he was 4, Olivia gave birth to twin girls, Clara and Rose, who kept the household in cheerful chaos. Wade proved to be a devoted father to all three children, making no distinction between Thomas and his biological daughters. On Thomas's 7th birthday, as they gathered around the table for cake, the boy looked at Wade with serious eyes and said, "Papa, why do I have a different last name than you?" Wade and Olivia exchanged glances. They had known this conversation would come eventually, had prepared for it as best they could. Wade pulled Thomas onto his lap and said gently, "Because you had another father before me, a good man named James Fletcher who loved you very much, even though he died before you were born. Your mama loved him, and he gave you your name. But I love you just as much as if you were born mine. And if you want, when you're old enough, you can decide if you want to keep the name Fletcher or take the name Barrett. Either way, you will always be my son." Thomas thought about this for a long moment, then wrapped his arms around Wade's neck. "I want both names, Thomas James Fletcher Barrett. That way I have all my fathers." The solution was so simple and perfect that Olivia found herself crying into her napkin while Wade blinked back tears of his own. They legally added Barrett to Thomas's name the following week, a symbol of the blended family they had become. The ranch continued to grow and thrive. By the time Thomas was 10, they had expanded their holdings significantly, purchasing adjacent land and building up one of the finest horse breeding operations in Texas. Wade's reputation as a horseman spread far beyond Sweetwater, and buyers came from across the state to purchase animals trained by him. But for all their success and prosperity, the greatest achievement was the love that filled their home. Olivia watched Wade with their children and marveled at how completely he had become part of the fabric of their lives. He was patient and kind, firm when necessary but always fair. The children adored him, and he loved them with a fierceness that sometimes took her breath away. One evening when Thomas was 15, a young man now helping to run the ranch, he found Wade alone in the barn and said, "Papa, I have been thinking about something." "What is that?" "I know about how you came to work here, how you helped Mama when my birth father died, and I want you to know something." Thomas's voice was steady despite the emotion behind it. "You are my real father. James Fletcher gave me life, and I honor his memory like Mama taught me. But you gave me everything else. You taught me how to be a man, how to work hard, how to treat people with respect. You loved Mama when she needed love, and you loved me when I needed a father. I could not have asked for anyone better." Wade found himself overwhelmed with emotion, pulling his son into a tight embrace. "Thank you for saying that. Being your father has been one of the greatest honors of my life. I want to run this ranch with you someday, to make it even bigger and better, to pass it on to my own children and tell them about the man who built it from nothing. We built it together, you, me, your mother. That is what family does." As the years passed, that is exactly what happened. Thomas married a local girl and brought her to live at the ranch, where she fit in seamlessly with the family. The twins grew into beautiful, spirited young women who ran the household with efficiency and warmth. And through it all, Wade and Olivia remained the steady center, their love deepening with each passing year. On their 20th wedding anniversary, Wade took Olivia riding out to the spot where they had first really talked, all those years ago. The landscape had changed, cultivated now and dotted with outbuildings, but the essence remained the same. "Do you ever regret it?" he asked, as they sat their horses side by side, looking out over the land they had built together. "Marrying me instead of remaining faithful to James's memory?" Olivia turned to him with a look of such love that it made his chest ache. "I have never regretted a single moment. James was my first love, and he will always have a place in my heart. But you, Wade Barrett, you are my great love. You saved me when I was drowning. You gave me a reason to keep fighting. You loved my son as your own and gave me more children and built a life with me that exceeds anything I could have imagined. How could I ever regret that? I just want you to be happy." "I am happy," deliriously, completely happy. You made that possible. They rode back to the house as the sun set behind them, painting the sky in shades of gold and amber. The house was warm and bright with lamplight, voices spilling out from the open windows as their family gathered for supper. Thomas was there with his wife and their new baby, making Wade and Olivia grandparents. The twins were setting the table, arguing cheerfully about something inconsequential. It was perfect and ordinary, and everything they had worked for. As they dismounted and headed inside, Wade took Olivia's hand and squeezed it gently. She squeezed back, a silent communication that needed no words. They had survived tragedy and built something beautiful from the ashes. They had honored the past while embracing the future, and they had done it together, bound by love and commitment and the unshakable belief that family was what you made it, not just what you were born into. The years continued to roll by with the steady rhythm of seasons and celebrations. Thomas became a father himself, then a grandfather, passing down the lessons Wade had taught him to the next generations. The ranch remained in the family, growing and adapting with the times, but never losing the essential character that Wade and Olivia had established. When Wade turned 60, the whole family gathered to celebrate. 3 generations filling the house with laughter and love. As he looked around at the faces of his children, grandchildren, and even great-grandchildren, he felt a sense of completion that was almost overwhelming. This was his legacy, not just the land and the livestock, but the people, the love, the bonds that would endure long after he was gone. Olivia, silver-haired now but still beautiful to him, caught his eye across the room and smiled. She knew what he was thinking, could read him as easily after all these years as if he had spoken aloud. He smiled back, and in that exchange was everything they had been through, everything they had built, everything they meant to each other. That night, after everyone had gone to bed and the house was finally quiet, they sat on the porch in the rocking chairs that had been there since the beginning. The stars wheeled overhead, brilliant and infinite, and somewhere in the distance a coyote called to the moon. "We did all right, did we not?" Olivia said softly, reaching for Wade's hand. He twined his fingers through hers, marveling as always at how perfectly they fit together. "We did better than all right. We did magnificently." "I love you, Wade Barrett. Thank you for riding up that dusty path all those years ago. Thank you for staying when you could have left. Thank you for loving me and Thomas and for giving us this beautiful life." "I love you too, Olivia. You made me a better man than I ever thought I could be. You gave me purpose and family and a home. I would do it all again in a heartbeat." They sat in comfortable silence, hands clasped, hearts full, watching the stars wheel slowly overhead. The ranch slept peacefully around them, generations of family safe and warm in their beds. It was everything they had fought for, everything they had dreamed of during those dark early days when the future seemed impossible. Wade Barrett had ridden into Sweetwater with nothing but the clothes on his back and a heart full of grief. He had found a woman who needed help and offered his hand without asking for anything in return. In doing so, he had found not just a job or a place to stay, but a whole life, complete with love and family and purpose. Olivia Fletcher had been a widow facing impossible odds, pregnant and alone with a ranch she could not manage by herself. She had accepted help from a stranger, and in return had found not just a competent worker, but a partner, a lover, a husband, and a father for her children. Together they had taken tragedy and transformed it into triumph. They had honored the past while building the future. They had created a legacy of love that would endure for generations. And on that warm Texas night, with stars overhead and their family safe around them, they knew with absolute certainty that they had found what everyone searches for but few ever achieve: a love worth living for, a purpose worth fighting for, and a happiness that transcended whatever hardships life might bring. The years had not always been easy. There had been droughts and floods, illness and injury, the ordinary trials that come with ranching and raising a family, but through it all, They had faced everything together, united in their commitment to each other and to the life they were building. Thomas, now in his 40s with children of his own, often told the story of how Wade had come into their lives. He spoke of it not as a tragedy, that his birth father had been killed, but as a testament to resilience and the power of love to heal and transform. He taught his own children to honor both fathers, James Fletcher, who had given him life, and Wade Barrett, who had given him everything else. The ranch had become something of a legend in the region, not just for its success, but for the family that ran it. People spoke of the Barretts with respect and admiration, recognizing that what they had built was more than just a prosperous business. It was a testament to what could be achieved when good people came together with shared purpose and unwavering commitment. As Wade and Olivia entered their 70s, they began gradually turning over more responsibilities to Thomas and his family. Though they remained active and engaged with the ranch they had spent a lifetime building, they took pleasure in watching their grandchildren learn the skills and values that had been passed down, seeing the continuation of everything they held dear. On a spring morning, much like the one when they had married, Wade woke to find Olivia watching him with those eyes that still captivated him after all these years. "What are you thinking?" he asked, pulling her close. "I am thinking about how grateful I am. For you, for our family, for this life. I am thinking that I am the luckiest woman who ever lived." "I am the lucky one," she laughed softly. "Let us agree we are both lucky, and leave it at that." They rose and dressed, making their way to the kitchen where the coffee was already brewing, courtesy of Thomas's wife who had come over early to start breakfast. The house that had once seemed too large now felt just right, filled with the comfortable chaos of multiple generations sharing space and life. After breakfast, Wade and Olivia took their customary morning walk around the property, a ritual they had maintained for decades. They walked slowly now, their steps not as sure as they once were, but their hands were clasped as firmly as ever. "Do you remember the first time I kissed you?" Wade asked as they paused near the barn. "On the porch, that September evening. Thomas was just a few months old. I remember thinking that I had no right to feel what I was feeling, that it was too soon, too improper. And now? Now I know that love does not follow a schedule or care about propriety. It comes when it comes, and the only thing we can control is whether we are brave enough to accept it." Wade pulled her into his arms, kissing her with all the tenderness and passion of their first kiss and every one that had followed. When they pulled apart, both were smiling. "I would do it all again," he said. "Every single moment, every challenge, every triumph, all of it, just to end up right here with you." "As would I, my love, as would I." They continued their walk, talking of small things and large, of the past and the future, of children and grandchildren, and the ranch that would outlive them both. There was a peace between them, a contentment that came from a life well lived and love well given. When they returned to the house, they found Thomas waiting for them on the porch, a serious expression on his face. For a moment, fear clutched at Wade's heart, but then Thomas smiled and said, "I have news. Margaret and I are expecting again. You are going to be great, great grandparents." The joy that filled them was indescribable. Another generation, another link in the chain they had forged with love and determination. Wade pulled his son into a tight embrace, marveling at the tall, strong man he had become, at the life he had built, at the continuation of everything they had started. That evening, as the extended family gathered for supper, Wade looked around the crowded table and felt his heart swell with gratitude. This was what mattered. Not the acres or the cattle or the success, but the people, the love, the connections that bound them all together. He raised his glass and cleared his throat. "I want to say something. I know I do not make speeches often, but this seems like the right time." He waited until he had everyone's attention. 43 years ago, I rode into Sweetwater with nothing to my name but a horse and a broken heart. I found work at a ranch owned by a widow who was pregnant and grieving and facing impossible odds. I planned to work for a season and then move on the way I always had. But something happened. I found a reason to stay. I found purpose and love and family. I found everything that makes life worth living. He looked at Olivia, who was watching him with tears in her eyes. You gave me all of that, Olivia. You and Thomas and all the children who came after. You took a drifter and made him a husband, a father, a grandfather. You turned a lonely man into the patriarch of a family I am proud to call my own. I cannot imagine what my life would have been if I had ridden past this place that day, but I know it would have been empty compared to what I have now. He turned to Thomas. And you, son, you let me be your father even though I did not earn that right by birth. You gave me the gift of your trust and love, and you have become a man I am incredibly proud of. Everything good about this family, everything strong and lasting, that is your doing. Thomas's face was wet with tears now. That is your doing, Papa. You showed me how to be a good man, a good husband, a good father. Everything I am, I learned from you. Wade looked around the table at all the faces, young and old, the family that had sprung from one widow's desperate need and one drifter's willingness to help. I want you all to remember something. Family is not just about blood. It is about showing up. It is about staying when things get hard. It is about loving people even when they are difficult to love. It is about building something together that will outlast any individual life. That is what we have here. That is what you will pass on to your children and grandchildren. Never forget it. Never take it for granted. The silence that followed was profound, broken only by the sound of sniffles and the scraping of napkins against eyes. Then Thomas stood and raised his own glass. To Papa Wade and Mama Olivia, the foundation of everything good in our lives, may we honor their legacy by living with the same courage, kindness, and love they have shown us. To Wade and Olivia, everyone echoed, and the sound of clinking glasses filled the room. The evening continued with laughter and stories, the comfortable rhythm of family who genuinely enjoyed being together. Wade and Olivia sat at the head of the table, hands clasped under the tablecloth, watching it all with deep satisfaction. As the years continued their relentless march forward, Wade and Olivia aged gracefully, their love remaining constant even as their bodies grew frailer. They celebrated their 50th wedding anniversary surrounded by 4 generations of family, a testament to the life they had built together. Wade passed away peacefully in his sleep at the age of 82, with Olivia holding his hand and their family gathered around. His last words were, "Thank you for the most beautiful life a man could ask for." Olivia, though heartbroken, took comfort in knowing he had lived fully and loved completely. She followed him 3 years later at the age of 80. In her final moments, surrounded by children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren, she smiled and whispered, "I am coming, Wade. Wait for me." They were buried side by side in the Sweetwater Cemetery, their graves marked with a simple stone that read, "Wade and Olivia Barrett, beloved parents, grandparents, and partners. They built a legacy of love." Next to them was the grave of James Fletcher, carefully maintained by the family he never knew. Because that was the Barrett way, to honor the past while celebrating the present, to make room in their hearts for everyone who had contributed to the family story. The ranch continued under Thomas's stewardship, then passed to his children, each generation adding their own chapter to the story while honoring the foundation laid by Wade and Olivia. The house remained filled with love and laughter, the land remained productive and beautiful, and the family remained close, bound by the values and traditions established so many years before. In time, the story of Wade and Olivia became family legend, told and retold to each new generation, how a pregnant widow facing impossible odds had been saved by a kind drifter, how that drifter had become a husband and father and the patriarch of a dynasty, how love and commitment and simple human decency had transformed tragedy into triumph. The children and grandchildren who never met Wade and Olivia knew them through stories and through the legacy they left behind. They knew them in the values that guided the family, in the love that bound them together, in the ranch that provided for them all. They knew them in the way Thomas spoke of his papa with reverence and affection, in the way the family gathered for meals and celebrations, in the way they supported each other through hardships and rejoiced in each other's successes. And on warm spring evenings, when the family gathered on the porch that Wade had rebuilt and expanded over the years, they could almost feel the presence of those two remarkable people who had started it all. Wade, the drifter who found a home; Olivia, the widow who found hope. Together they had created something that would endure long after they were gone, a testament to the transformative power of love and the enduring strength of family. Their story lived on not just in words, but in actions, in the way each generation raised their children, ran the ranch, treated their neighbors, and loved their spouses. It lived on in the name Barrett, which had come to represent not just a family, but a set of values: integrity, kindness, perseverance, and above all, love. The ranch itself became a symbol in the region, a place where people knew they would be treated fairly, where a handshake was as good as a contract, where family came first, but strangers were welcomed with open arms. It was everything Wade and Olivia had dreamed it could be, and more than they could have imagined during those dark days when the future seemed so uncertain. And so the story ends not with death, but with life. Not with endings, but with continuations, because the best love stories are not the ones that end with a kiss or a wedding, but the ones that keep going. Generation after generation, building and growing and transforming while maintaining the essential core of what made them special in the first place. Wade Barrett had ridden into Sweetwater, Texas in 1877 looking for work. He found a pregnant widow, a struggling ranch, and the beginning of a love story that would span decades and touch countless lives. He stepped in as a father to a child not his own, as a partner to a woman still grieving her lost husband, as a builder of something that would outlast them both. Olivia Fletcher had been left alone and desperate, facing a future that seemed impossible to navigate. She took a chance on a stranger, opened her heart to love again, and in doing so created a family and a legacy that would endure for generations. Together they proved that love is not limited by circumstance or timing, that family is built through choice and commitment as much as through blood, and that from the ashes of tragedy can rise something beautiful and lasting. Their story was one of heartbreak and healing, of loss and redemption, of despair transformed into hope. It was a story of the American West, of hard work and determination, of building something from nothing through sheer will and unwavering commitment. But most of all, it was a love story, simple and profound, about two people who found each other when they needed it most and built a life worth living together. And that love, that commitment, that choice to stay when others would have left and to fight when others would have given up, that was their true legacy. Not the land or the money or even the children, though those were all important. Their legacy was the proof that love can conquer even the hardest circumstances, that family can be chosen as well as born, and that the human heart has an infinite capacity for healing and hope. The sun set over the Barrett Ranch, painting the Texas sky in shades of gold and crimson, just as it had done for over a century. The house stood strong, generations of love soaked into its very walls. The land stretched out in all directions, productive and beautiful, a testament to careful stewardship and dedication. And in the cemetery in Sweetwater, two simple graves bore witness to the love story that had made it all possible. Wade and Olivia Barrett rested side by side, their long lives completed, their love story told. But in another sense, their story was just beginning with each new generation that carried forward their values and their legacy. Their great-great-grandchildren played in the same yard where Thomas had taken his first steps, rode horses descended from the ones Wade had trained, ate dinner at a table built by his own hands, The story of the pregnant widow and the cowboy who stepped in as a father had become the foundation of something far larger than either of them could have imagined. It had become a family, a ranch, a legacy, and a love story for the ages. And in the hearts of all who came after, Wade and Olivia lived on, forever young, forever in love, forever the beginning of everything good that followed.